Good afternoon and hello. My name is Ramian Pierre, and I am part of the team at the Executive Leadership Council. Welcome. The Executive Leadership Council, or the ELC, is the preeminent membership organization committed to increasing the number of global Black executives in C suites, on the boards, in Fortune 500 and Global 1000 enterprises. And currently, we have more than 860 active members who represent member affiliated companies across the United States and the United Kingdom. You can learn more about us by visiting www.elcinfo.com. But let me get into our conversation for today. Today, we are speaking with Dr. Summer Allen about the emotional intelligence and dialogue skills needed for adults to have courageous conversations. Dr. Summer Allen is founder and CEO of EQ Strategists, and she is also author of Lose the Debate, a practical guide to emotional intelligence and successful dialogue. At the ELC, we apply a "what's the Black about it" lens to all of our work. So Dr. Allen has agreed to walk us through how Black corporate professionals can apply the strategies and tactics identified in her research and described in her book. Let's get into it. All right, Dr. Allen, Summer, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Ramian. Hello, everyone. So excited to be here.
Uh, we are excited to have you too. And I'm going to jump right in. Well, actually, let me tell you how we're going to have this conversation.
Okay.
I want to end it with Q&A with the audience. So
Okay.
folks who are watching us live, if you have questions at any point, please drop them into the chat so that Dr. Allen and I can discuss them at the end. But before we get to your questions, Summer, I want to make sure first we clearly define the problem so that folks know what we're dealing with, what we're trying to address, and why it matters to Black corporate professionals. After we define the problem, I'm hoping we can really outline a powerful strategy to address that problem and then walk people through some specific tactics, basically some actions they can apply today, tomorrow, immediately to move the needle in terms of the problem. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. So, defining the problem. I think the clue is in the first three words of your book title, Lose the Debate, but indulge me here.
Yes.
How would you describe the problem your book is seeking to solve for Black corporate professionals?
When it comes to Black corporate professionals, the book really addresses something that I personally identified early in my own career. Is how do we really orient ourselves in corporate spaces, especially in spaces where we're not the majority, where we might be first generation. And so it may be a little different and nuanced for us. And even as we progress through the corporate ladder, it's that ability to really connect with other people, connect across difference, authentically network and build strategic relationships. Is that ability to really understand how we're seen and even how our brand is built. And a lot of that is grounded in this component of emotional intelligence and our ability to have courageous conversations. When we think about courageous conversations, we always kind of put it in that lens of DE&I, right? Having the courageous conversations around really big topics. And while this book absolutely addresses that and gives us the tools and capabilities and skills and even the confidence to do that, also what is in this book is our ability to just really understand how do we embrace our ability to have courageous conversations through the lens of emotional intelligence. Meaning, if a conversation happens or a situation that is really important, but we know it's a tough conversation that needs to be had, how do I approach it? Do I approach it in a way where I am a kind of aggressive with it, especially if it's a hot topic, or do I just avoid it altogether? And neither one of those strategies are beneficial, right? And so, what we're really looking to do is identify what are the most beneficial strategies for us to be able to communicate effectively, manage our relationships effectively, and even create a heightened sense of self awareness, even in spaces where we don't necessarily always see ourselves.
So I love this, and I love the way you framed it as this is not just about having conversations. It's not just about having productive dialogues. It is that, but it's also about connecting across difference, networking, being seen, promoting your brand in an authentic way. And it sounds like you're arguing that emotional intelligence is key to this. So let's dig into that a little bit. How are you defining emotional intelligence, and why is emotional intelligence important to Black corporate professionals?
Oh, I love this. So I've been doing extensive research on emotional intelligence. It first started in my master's program when I identified that emotional intelligence was one of the key determining factors to leadership effectiveness and career success. Right. So when that came about in the research and I kept seeing this validated, I analyzed my own experiences. I was early in career and I realized I was going through corporate, not necessarily having a lot of emotional intelligence myself. And exactly. And so that vulnerable component really made me dive into the research and really understand what emotional intelligence is. But oftentimes when I read it, it still felt very disconnected for me as a person of color. It still didn't feel like I could really own it. So I decided I wanted to redefine it and create an entire framework that felt very useful to me and my own experiences. And so the way in which I define emotional intelligence is our ability to effectively acknowledge, identify, regulate, and communicate our emotions. And so it's that first part. And then the second part is our ability to also be able to understand the emotions of others. And so each one of those is very integral to our ability to really be successful in corporate spaces and even in our personal lives. So the first one, our ability to effectively acknowledge emotions, just acknowledging that we have emotions, that something is happening, that I am feeling something, that I'm experiencing something, right? The next one is identifying the emotion and not just saying, yes, I'm having an emotion, but accurately being able to put the true and accurate vocabulary to that emotion. And when I say the accurate vocabulary to that emotion, it's really the ability to say, am I feeling mad or am I feeling insecure? Am I feeling upset or am I feeling disappointed? And the reason that accuracy is so important is because I need to tend to the actual and accurate emotion that I'm experiencing. Because the way that I would tend to an emotion if I am upset or is different than the way I would tend to it if I'm disappointed, which is also very different that I would tend to it in terms of if I'm insecure. And so that accuracy is important. Another aspect is our ability to regulate our emotions. When someone does something to us or says something to us and I'm triggered, I need to be able to regulate that in real time in order to manage myself, my brand, my reputation, and the relationship. And then the most important one is oftentimes we get through all of those, but we miss that final component, our ability to communicate that emotion to another person. And that's where we have the ability to set boundaries and share our experiences with others in that communication component. And then once we get through all of that, guess what? Only once we get through all of that, then we then get to our ability to be able to understand the emotions of others. Because I have to be able to understand where I am emotionally. I have to be able to regulate myself emotionally before I can understand the emotions of another person and really dive into their situation. So that's how I define emotional intelligence and frame it.
This is great. So help us understand the cost of this. What is the cost, particularly to Black corporate professionals, if they have suboptimal levels of being able to acknowledge their emotions, identify their emotions, regulate their emotions, and communicate their emotions?
The cost is great. And we could look at what costs are we looking at right now? Cost professionally, personally, because it goes across all spectrums, right? When it comes to professionally, and I think about the lack of emotional intelligence, for me, what really resonated with me is how I was showing up. And I was really leaning towards my IQ. I am a high achiever. It was all about performance. I, understood that I had this education that I walked into the corporate space with, and I kind of gravitated to that. What research tells us is when it comes to our ability to truly be successful, it's that IQ versus EQ. And that emotional intelligence actually leads and gives us more of an opportunity for success. And so when we talk about the cost is our relationships. The cost is our ability to have a positive and professional brand. I have so many people come to me who are heads of corporations, who have high achieving leaders in their corporations. And they say, they do such a great job. They really perform, but no one really likes them. They're hard to work with. Or they're high performers, but no one really knows them, meaning they hide themselves. And so one of the things when it comes to our ability to really lead in organizations is that we have that emotional intelligence component, because one of the biggest component is our own self-awareness, understanding who we are, understanding our past, understanding our traumas, understanding our triggers. And so if I can walk into a space and I understand my traumas and I can understand how they might be showing up, that allows me to change how I show up. If I understand that some of my traumas are really grounded in how I'm behaving, only when I have that self awareness can I change that if that is no longer serving me. And so, really, the emotional intelligence component allows us to really grow and to receive feedback and continuously evolve as we continue to move through our careers.
This is great. I and I've at the OC we've heard many of the professionals that we work with say that they focus, particularly the early, even maybe even mid, perhaps even later part of their careers, focusing on doing great work,
In the work.
leaning into that IQ, right?
Mhm.
We hear over and over again that they want their work to speak for itself.
There you go.
But you pointing out here that IQ will get you partway there, but EQ is going to get you all the way there because it has to do with getting all the way there involves relationships, it involves your brand, it involves being seen, having access to growth opportunities. I really appreciate you underlining the importance of EQ as the as a differentiator between good and great.
There you go. There you go. And if I could touch on that just a little bit more, because this is
Yeah.
where, again, I think this is for me. Again, I always say for me, this is where I hung my hat. I hung my hat on my accomplishments. I hung my hat on my outcomes. I hung my hat on my degrees and education and certifications, but I was still stuck in my career and I couldn't
Mm.
figure out why. And it was that relationship component, that emotional intelligence component that was really getting me stuck. And again, it was the research that helped me see that. Because again, let's not say that the cognitive abilities are irrelevant. They're absolutely not. But we're all hired at the same level, right? So if I'm hired at the same level as someone else, that means we probably have the same degree. That means they probably done the same background on us. So we come in cognitively and intellectually pretty much at the same level. And so if we all go through the same training and have the same amount of knowledge in terms of how we do the job, then what is the differentiator at that point? The
Mm.
differentiator is really the emotional intelligence component. That's what drives us into the difference. And those components of emotional intelligence, in case we're not clear about what those look like, let's think about those. It is self awareness, it's your ability to regulate your emotions,
Yeah.
it's the ability to show empathy, it's your ability to be open to feedback, social awareness, being able to read the room and navigate those. And so those are the distinctions that drive us outside of just our intellect.
I want to springboard off that last thing you said about reading the room because I can imagine there may be a number of people listening to us right now thinking, "Hey, I'm a successful Black corporate professional. I'm admired. I'm well respected. I'm accomplished. How is that possible? How for me to achieve that level of advancement in my career, yet you're telling me that there might be the possibility that I still need to develop my read the room skills, my empathy skills, my emotional intelligence. Like make it make sense. How can I be a VP of blah blah blah, yet still need to work on my dialogue or emotional intelligence? Help convince me, please.
Okay. That is a big question. That is a loaded question. And the reason I say it's a big question and it's a loaded question because it's so many variables that exist there. Because you can be very successful and you could have climbed the ladder, but you can also be exceptionally unregulated in your personal life because you don't create those boundaries in order to be able to balance your work and your personal life. And so, yes, I may be completely effective and successful in my professional life, but there are other variables that we have to look at as well. How are we managing ourselves and regulating ourselves? And so when we think about what it looks like to truly be emotionally intelligent, I always tell people there's always room to improve our emotional intelligence. I look at it as it's on a spectrum, and we're never perfect at it. There are always areas and avenues where we can really analyze our emotional intelligence in each one of those components to be able to say, where do we have opportunities for growth? And it might lie in that self awareness. I might still be collecting accolades because I might be cutting people's knees off in the process, right? And so while I am successful, like have I done it in a way that lives up to my legacy? Have I done it in a way that really allows me to really grow real authentic relationships with others or to manage a team successfully and effectively where they feel safe?
Ooh, okay, this is good. So I want to get into the strategy piece, but let me underline that because I experienced a couple of ahas as you were talking there. That yeah, I can be successful, but if I'm successful and exhausted, perhaps it's because I'm not as emotionally intelligent as I would like to be. Speaking to that boundary setting aspect of emotional intelligence you mentioned earlier, I might be successful, but I might be very unpopular because I've been, as you said, cutting people off at the knees. In which case, I could also develop my emotional intelligence. I might be I might be successful, but this is not sustainable.
There you go.
So improving my emotional intelligence skills might help me be successful in a sustainable way. And then lastly, I might be successful, but I'm not living according to my values or the legacy I want to lead. And again, improving my emotional intelligence might help me be successful in a way that I want to be remembered for, as opposed to being a cautionary tale to the Black corporate professionals who come behind me.
There you go.
All right, so you convinced me. Let's get into solutions. In your book, you present the actor model, ACTER, as the solution to this problem of needing to grow and expand your emotional intelligence. How would you describe the actor model and what it does to Black corporate professionals?
The actor, and I want to give a bit of context. So the book and even the actor model was created because I've been doing leadership development for almost 20 years. You know, I started when I was about two. But in doing this work, there are so many different frameworks, there's so many different models, there's so many different theories and philosophies, but nothing had really brought it all together to bring a really holistic view of really understanding how do we have courageous conversations, and then how do we do that through the lens of emotional intelligence. And so what I did is I laid it all out and I created the actor model. And in the actor model, that is where I really broke it down to say each one of these components allows for a different lens to look through in terms of emotional intelligence. So when we think about the actor model, the first one is appreciating diversity of opinions. And so that's one where we get an opportunity to really think outside of ourselves and understand how do we look at other people and understand their perspective. This is where we go into the phrases of perspective taking and being able to understand what is my perspective, but also what is the perspective of another person. And oftentimes we are so dug in on our own perspective, not realizing that my perspective has been built and drawn based upon my own personal experiences. So how I see things and how I feel about things, those are based off of my lived experiences. And based off of that, another person who will walk into the exact situation will see something very differently because of their own personal experiences. But oftentimes we don't see it that way. And I see this so often just because I kind of scroll through Instagram and look at the comments. And if anybody's looked through the Instagram comments lately, what you'll see is the lack of appreciation of diversity of opinions, the lack of another person just having a different perspective than another person. And at the end of the day, that's not helpful to us individually or even as a society. It creates so much division between us. And we see that even coming into the workplace where we cannot work together. And when we get into that space where we don't have that appreciation of diversity of opinion, that's when we really miss out on those opportunities for creativity, innovation, and insights. And so when we think about how we really drive change and we lead through these innovative type spaces, our ability to be able to hold space for another person's opinion is really vital. And we bring that even into our personal conversations, that's necessary as well. All right. So another aspect under appreciating diversity of opinions is the need to be right. This is a big one. And I'm going to say this is a big one for me because this is where I used to be. I grew up and I used to have this perfectionist mindset. And so for me, I always needed to be right. And even given feedback almost hurt a little bit. And so when we think about appreciating diversity of opinions in another component that we explore is that need to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we work our way out of that? And one of the things that you'll see in the work, it is a workbook. It is grounded in research, it is grounded in theory, but it creates a path for you to go on a self-awareness and a self-reflective journey. And so it really pushes you to think about, am I comfortable with other people's opinions and them challenging even my perspective and my perception? Do I have the tendency to need to be right? Do I have certain blind spots where I'm not willing to really see the rest of the world? And the most powerful one in the A for me is the fixed versus growth mindset. Because again, a lot of the work that I do is grounded in my own experiences and from the experiences of my client.
Yeah.
When we think about the fixed versus growth mindset, this is where we have to ask ourselves, am I stuck in my belief system? And I'm not willing to take risks in terms of having the conversation or saying the wrong thing. And the reason that's why it's called Lose the Debate. That is really why I titled it Lose the Debate, because we have to change our perception in terms of what does loss look like. Because in this book, when we talk about lose the debate, it really is about if I lose, I'm actually giving myself an opportunity to learn. In the process of me losing, what I'm doing is opening myself up to a new perception. If I'm allowing myself and giving myself permission, that means I'm allowing myself to have a growth mindset. And so that's the powerful part of the A. You want to go through the rest of these, Brandon? Because I know you. I saw the question. I saw that finger.
I got so many questions, and yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you with my church finger, but let me underline a few things that you said, and then let's jump into tactics for each one of the letters. ACTER. But let me start with that last comment about where you explained the lose the debate piece. I really appreciate that, not just because I'm the product of Quaker education, where we frequently said there are no winners and losers, there's just winners and learners. Now, as a kid, that didn't feel so great, but I see the value of that as an adult, about holding space for things that I may not necessarily agree with. And I also want to underline the piece that you said about the book being actually a workbook, because as I was heavily skimming through it over the weekend, I did see a number of places where, like, you're actively, as a reader, you're actively asked to engage, to write, to do some brainstorming, do some thinking. It's not just a read all these pages. It's really, let's try and take some introspective moments. And I'm going to admit, even though I didn't fully engage, it was a bit uncomfortable. Now, my therapist tells me no one ever died from a feeling. I'm not so sure that's true, but I can tell folks who were willing to engage with the book that it will raise some feelings, and perhaps that's a microcosm for all the emotional intelligence work that's required to actually develop these skills. That said, let's get to the tactical level for these things. So ACTER, let's start with the A. You've already defined A for us. It's appreciating diversity of opinion. Appreciating diversity of opinions. What are some things that Black corporate professionals can do today or immediately to put that strategy into action, to get down to the tactical level?
And so, again, one of the things I'll say is when we think about the tactical components of this, the first thing is the self awareness and really doing the self reflection.
Yeah.
And I always say, think back on situations that you've been in. And when someone pushed against your thoughts, when someone questioned your opinion, or when someone had a different opinion, how did you respond? And because everything about this is about you being able to see yourself and to change your behaviors. This is not about the other person. So I'm never going to give you information in the book as this is how you change someone else, because that is not the goal of a courageous conversation and engaging in this way. It is about how do I expand my perspective through this conversation, and how am I courageous enough to enter into it and have the conversation. That's where the courage comes from.
Hold on. So just to make sure I'm clear about that, the idea of, or the intent behind productive, courageous conversations is, as I enter this conversation with Dr. Allen, how might I be expanded? How might I learn? Not how I can change her or how I can convince her. Correct?
There you go. That's exactly it. Because people always say, "Well, how do I make this other person?" You can't make another person do anything. But what you can do is you can change your perspective in terms of how you enter into the conversation, what your expectations of the conversations are, aware of what your triggers are and your traumas that may lend itself and show up in that conversation, and what you want the outcomes of the conversation to be. And as you go through the process, how you can learn. A lot of the work that I do is in DE&I. I do a lot of this work, especially around these courageous conversations. I hear a lot of things from people. And oftentimes it is triggering, it's jarring for me to understand that people believe and think a certain way. But oftentimes, if I can pause my emotions enough and really try to understand who they are and where they've come from, it changes the entire narrative for me. It really does. Go ahead.
And pause is actually one of the tactics that you suggest as a way of appreciating diversity of opinions, that it's helpful, often helpful, to pause the conversation and define terms just to make sure that you and I are on the same, literally on the same page, that we're talking about the same thing, defining things in the same way. Yes?
Absolutely, absolutely. That pause, and we talk about that a lot when we get deeper into the framework in terms of emotional regulation, because it's the power of the pause. It's the power to be able to give yourself enough, your brain enough time to calm itself down after it's been in an amygdala hijack. And so we'll talk about that after we get to emotional regulation and triggers, but that is a huge component of it.
What are other tactics that um, professionals can use in conversation to help them appreciate diversity of opinions?
All right. So when we think about that, the first one is understanding what is your conversation goals. When we think about a tactic and we want to appreciate the diversity of opinions, it's asking myself, what is it that I want to get out of this conversation? And what is it that I am willing to really understand from this other person? Because at the end of the day, we all have something to learn from other people, even if their opinions are very stark and different from our own. The challenging thing is when we have those divergent opinions, it's like, I believe something completely different from yours, and oftentimes we just cut ourselves off from being able to hear the other person. And so the tactical advice that I give the other person is, what is the end game? What is your goal? What are you really trying to accomplish in this conversation? Are you just trying to change the other person, prove that they're right and that you're wrong? But if not, if you're just trying to really understand and create even an understanding of terms of how you think and feel in this space and in this conversation, that will change your entire energy as you go into the conversation. So in that first one, it really is about true self-awareness, and understanding what it is that you want out of the conversation and being able to manage your energy in order to reach that specific outcome.
Okay, I love this. So, tactics include getting clear about your intent, your end goal for the conversation, defining terms so that you and the other person are on the same page, using the power of the pause. And that actually reminds me of something else that was in the book in terms of a tactic, is using the phrase, can you give me a moment to think about what you just said?
Yep.
Which is something that, as I read it, I thought, that sounds really cool. I am not certain I'd be brave enough to say that in the middle of a conversation, like literally press pause. But you help me give you some words of encouragement around that.
So the thing about the book, and I tell people this all the time, I want you, anybody who buys the book and who reads it, to approach it with an understanding. It is not about perfection. The goal of the book is truly about progress and continuous growth, because you won't do any of this perfect all of the time, even after you've read the book multiple times, because every situation will come at you and will feel differently. But the goal is that you create these behaviors over time that will eventually just become a part of your personality, and a part of your dialogue. So for me, I have gotten to a point now over time where I used to pop off. Like, again, I write books based off of my own experience, where someone would say something or someone would give me feedback and I would respond. But now I've learned this ability to be able to pause and to really be curious in those moments. So in appreciating diversity of opinions, the phrases that I throw in there to do that, and I use these phrases all the time, is the yes and. It's
Mm.
not either or, it's not but, it's like, it's not the but no. It's, if I hear something that's very different from my perspective and my opinion, I always say yes, because I'm acknowledging what the other person says. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's their perspective and it's their perception, and that is okay. And both realities can be true. They can both be true. And so instead of saying no, I say yes, and then I share my perspective. And so that allows for not the negation of another person's perspective, but the expansion of the perception for both of us.
Oh, this is good. Okay, so I want to move to the second letter in the acronym, in the actor acronym model, ACTER. So the A was for appreciating diversity of opinion, um, and I appreciate the last thing you said about, um, you were speaking to, the way I heard it was your bias to action, which I think is pretty common among Black corporate professionals, that we are socialized to stimulus and immediately react because we don't have a lot of time, or we feel the pressure of time in the workplace. But a big component of the A sounds like slowing things down, as well as having awareness of what our intent is.
Yes.
But let's move to the C, which is for curiosity. For folks on the call, how are you defining curiosity? And then let's get into tactics on how to apply curiosity in conversations.
All right. This is one of my favorite ones. There are some that really are highlights for me, and see, curiosity is one of those. When we talk about curiosity, I read a long time ago that curiosity actually blocks judgment. When I approach a situation with pure curiosity, not curiosity to prove someone wrong, not curiosity to defend, but pure curiosity in terms of asking myself, okay, what do I need to know? What are their thoughts? But also curiosity of self. The first part is curiosity of self. What is my past? What are my traumas that might be coming into this conversation? How might I be triggered in this conversation? What are my real thoughts and opinions and feelings around this topic as I approach this? What are my perceptions around this? Those are really important questions to ask. When we have these courageous conversations, like we talk about in DE and we talk about aspects of anything. Let's talk about social injustice again. We think about it from our own experience as a Black person, a Black professional. One of the questions I always ask is, what is the emotion that you feel around this topic? And then I hear a lot of Black people say, I'm exhausted. Okay. Or I'm frustrated. Okay. Well, think about, if you are exhausted or frustrated, those are really strong emotions. And if you are going into a conversation with those emotions, what could possibly happen with that? And oftentimes we don't think about how we feel about a topic before we enter into it. And we just go into it, and all of a sudden, our emotions get the best of us because they're very powerful. And when they're subconscious and they're sitting there, and one person says one thing, they have more power over us than we have in that moment. And so when we talk about our ability to have curiosity with self, it is really getting down and having proactive dialogue with ourselves before we enter into a conversation. And sometimes I find myself having to say, I'm not necessarily ready to have this conversation. I appreciate that you brought it to me, but I haven't been able to really think about it. And really what I'm saying is, I don't even know how I feel about it. I don't even know what my perspective is in it. And so another one is the curiosity of others. And when we think about curiosity of others, again, this is where we avoid judgment, and we remove judgment as a part of our curiosity, and we make curiosity pure. And that's where we're able to really identify, really, what are the questions that I need to ask? What story do I understand the entire story? Are there any biases that I'm having here? What might be their experience in this situation? And so that's where real curiosity is grounded in ourselves and in others.
And Dr. Allen, in the book, you spend a good amount of time talking about questions, particularly around open-ended questions. And I will admit that there are plenty of times that I ask out of the powered by my bias towards action. I think I ask questions that are closed-ended or that are or questions that are statements in disguise. Do you have advice for how we might try and keep our questions open as opposed to close or leading?
Well, I think all of us, we understand when we're asking an open and closed question. The thing that I want people to start reflecting on is, what has been the benefit of that, right? Am I getting my needs met? Am I creating more of expansive understanding by asking closed-ended questions? Oftentimes the answer is no. And so understanding when it comes to curiosity, what I would always encourage is that pause, right? Giving that pause. And what I love about the book is that I included phrases, because oftentimes it's really hard to understand what that sounds like.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give a really good example. So for me, one of the phrases that I use and I put in the book is, when I'm triggered or if somebody says something, and I'm going to keep it real right now. When somebody says something, I know they're being slick. That's what happens. Like, I know you're being slick with what you're saying, and you're being, kind of passive aggressive. I always pause. I have to regulate my emotions, and I have to ask, can you help me understand what you just said?
Okay. You're having them do the work.
Yes, I'm having them do the work. I take the judgment out. I take the burden of responsibility away from myself,
Mhm.
and I put it on them, to really help me understand. But I'm approaching it through a lens of curiosity, and it's through the tone of genuine curiosity of, what, they might have said something, and I might be in a bad mood. I might have misunderstood them. So instead of me jumping to the conclusion, I really want to really understand what they just said and what they meant by what they just said. And so that's one of my phrases that I go to. It really is all about the tone, though. Can you help me understand what you just said? And I do it
Yeah,
with the peer curiosity component.
that's one where I would need to practice my tone with saying it, because you're right. In the moment, my emotions may have a tone that is not going to serve my needs and get me what I want.
Correct.
And now you mentioned trigger. Let's go there. That's the T in the actor model. A is for appreciating diversity of opinion. C is for curiosity. T is for triggers. Let's talk about triggers, because you brought up something in the book that I didn't expect about the connection between triggers and trauma. Talk us through that.
All right. So when we think about triggers, people always ask the question, what is a trigger? A trigger is anything that creates a strong negative response. And so someone could do something to you, someone can say something to you. You can even walk into a space that reminds you of a past experience that was negative, and that creates a trigger within you. And so triggers are really powerful emotional responses to events, phrases, and individuals. The thing about triggers and why I put it in the book is because they are the things that derail a conversation. And it's like having carbon monoxide in a room. You don't know that it's there, but when it hits you, it hits you. And so when we think about triggers, what I encourage individuals to do, and this is where we get really kind of vulnerable in the book, and we really dive into some of the aspects of our lives that we might not have necessarily done so before, is to think about moments where someone has done something to you or said something to you, and you were triggered. Because it's often easier to understand reactively kind of what a trigger is. And so we have that activity where we really allow a person to identify those moments where they were triggered. But then the next step is not just to understand what a trigger might be reactively, but to understand the why. The why is the most important component. What is the trigger and why is that your trigger? And that's really important because everybody has triggers. None of us are without them. And the thing about triggers is they are as diverse and unique as each and every one of us. And so guess what, Raymond? My triggers are not your triggers. And the way in which certain things trigger me would not trigger you. And that's okay. But the reason I have these triggers is based off, again, my own lived unique experiences. And so what I have to do is I have to proactively unpack what that trigger is. Because if I don't, what it will continuously do is hijack me. And it will have, again, the power over me. And so for me, again, I will keep using myself as an example. In a corporate space, again, I realized that especially if someone corrected me in public, like in a meeting or anywhere on a Zoom, anywhere in public, I would be triggered. And early in my career, when I didn't realize that was my trigger, the way that I behaved and responded wasn't the most appropriate. It wasn't one that people were giving me feedback on. People
Yeah.
accepted it and they let it happen, but it wasn't healthy and it wasn't beneficial for me and my perception. And so from that, I had to learn what my triggers were so that I could minimize them over time and their effects that they had on me. And only once I was able to understand what they were could I then do that. But if I kept walking into the same situation over and over with the same trigger, unaware of them, I kept having the same response.
This is really helpful. That our first step with being able to manage your triggers is to recognize them, um, understand not only what they are, but why I might have them. What's the really good reason from my past experience, my lived experience about why I have this trigger? I not imagine, I know from the book that you also, it's helpful to name that trigger and to find some way of accepting that trigger. But my question is, do I have to accept it forever, for now, for a few minutes? Help me with that part.
Now, that's the beautiful thing about our own self awareness. When we become more self aware, especially when it comes to our triggers, the trigger, while it may sit there, how impactful it is for us over time becomes less, and our
Hmm.
response to it becomes less. And what we also have a beautiful opportunity to do is to proactively communicate that to other people. And so sometimes, if I'm in a workspace where I'm working with someone really closely, and this is a relationship that's really important to me, and they have a behavior or tendency that is triggering for me, then I have the right vocabulary to be able to go share that with them. Again, the relationship has to be there for me to be able to do that. Or if I don't have that relationship, I now know this is what is triggering me, and I can now manage that more effectively. But it's my own self-worth, because sometimes we just keep getting triggered over and over and not knowing why. And because we don't have the awareness or the vocabulary, we can't set boundaries, or we can't self-soothe in order to not let that trigger continue to bother us.
That part, the self-soothing, I that's something that I recognized I needed to learn as a part of my self-care,
Mhm.
that I've been working on. But I want to go back to something you just said a moment ago about, as we work through our triggers, they have less and less power over us. I want to make sure I heard that right, because it sounds like the way to not be hijacked by our triggers, or to reduce how often we are hijacked, is not to avoid them, but actually to work through them. Am I hearing
Abs-
that right?
Absolutely. So
All right.
to not to feel them, to acknowledge that they're happening, to name them, and then to proactively work through them. And keep in mind, it's like riding a bike. Every time you get triggered in that moment, it's your opportunity to implement the work and to practice and to do it, and to say, no, this. I'm feeling the trigger. It is here, and what can I do about this? How would I like to behave versus how I just normally want to behave.
Okay, this is awesome. I want to go to the next one, but let me just summarize what we've covered so far. The A for appreciating diversity of opinions, the C for curiosity, the T for triggers, and now let's get into the E for emotional regulation. All right, Dr. Allen, help us understand, um, what does it mean to really regulate one's emotions, and how might one do that?
Okay, so I said there are a few points in the book that are my favorites. This is my other emotional regulation. Because what I say is, this is nothing in this chapter you will see on Real Housewives. Like that's just what you won't see, because I watch that show now after writing this book, and I'm like, this like there's no emotional regulation happening here.
No, it makes for good television, not necessarily good for good careers, right?
At all, not for good careers at all. And so when we think about emotional regulation is our ability to be able to regulate our moods, our disruptive moods, and our impulses. And so this is the direct correlation to our behavior and how we respond. And that's why it comes right after triggers, because you get triggered. And now the next thing we need to know is, how do we emotionally regulate in this trigger? How do we now manage our behaviors? And so in emotional regulation, we break down the amygdala hijack. This is the part that I love. This is the neuroscience that I just fell in love with, because almost understanding why we get triggered and why we behave the way that we behave, that is the powerful part of this. Because what the research tells us is, when we are triggered, our brain feels this strong emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? The brain does not know if it is a tiger that we're protecting ourselves from, or our boss. Like, that's the challenging part. And so your amygdala becomes hijacked at that moment. You're triggered and that emotion gets really, really high. And so, therefore, guess what your brain does? It actually cuts off the logical parts of itself in order to protect itself. Because what it says is, if you're in
Wait,
front
wait,
of
wait. Say it twice for the people in the back.
people in the back, yeah,
When you're under threat or under perceived threat, what does your brain do?
it cuts off the logical parts of itself in order to protect you from yourself. Yeah,
So
it's
we're talking about executive function, frontal
gone,
lobe stuff
gone,
gone.
gone. And the question people always say, but why would the brain do that? Because the brain knows, in the logical space, what sits there is sequencing. What sits there is that really rational thinking. And so that's why when you see people in emergency situations, like in a fire, they say, I jumped out the window and I didn't even think about it. Or if you see a child in danger, you'll run in front of a car to save, and you'll say, I didn't even think about it. Because the brain shuts off that part of itself that would think about it, because otherwise you would overthink the situation, overanalyze the situation in a way that you wouldn't activate. Now, the brain doesn't know, again, if it's an emergency or if your boss just got on your nerves. All it knows is it felt that high visceral emotion. And so now that logical part is shut off, and you are operating in the fight or flight space of your brain. And so either I'm going to respond aggressively, or I'm going to shut down. Those are the two options that you have in your amygdala hijack. There are no other options that exist there until you calm yourself down.
Well, how do we do that? Help me with that part. How do I calm myself down, like get out of the amygdala hijack situation and like calm myself down enough so that I can regulate my emotions? What sort of self talk or physical activity can I do?
All right, so we talked about one of them a few moments ago, breathing. And I know it sounds so simple. It really does. But it is that intentional breathing, not that heavy breathing, like, yeah, like when your mama tells you to do something. No, it's not. It's like
No huffing, no huffing.
not huffing, not puffing, but it really is that deep breath to say, okay. And almost literally as you breathe out, say, okay, I have understanding I have been triggered. That's why, again, we went through the first section of triggers to understand I have been triggered, that awareness that I have been triggered and that I am in that space.
Yeah.
And so then there are other components that we walk you through in the book. The other one is the identifying the power of choice. Identifying the power of choice, because oftentimes we can say, somebody made me so mad that they made me say this to them, or they made me do this to them. No, only we have the choice to really decide how we respond to things, right?
Yes.
And so for me, what I have been utilizing as a practice for myself and what I put into the book is understanding the power again of my legacy, understanding the power of the relationship that I have. I have a legacy chart of every person in my life, family, friends, and even the people in my work life.
Oh, what does that mean, a legacy chart?
So my legacy chart is, and this is, again, I used to teach 7 habits. So in my legacy chart, it lists how would you like people to remember you? How would you like to be remembered in each one of these relationships in your life? And so
Yeah.
there's certain things that we do that impact those relationships, right? Positive or negative. And so how I respond is a part of that.
I feel like we should pass the plate. You just gave me a word, and actually helped me debrief something that happened last week, a couple weekends ago. I was going to a memorial service, and I set out for myself 3 intentions for that weekend. I wanted to feel gratitude, I wanted to have peace, and I wanted to support my family and friends as long as it didn't get in the way of my gratitude and peace.
There you go.
And once I did that and communicated that to the essential family members, because we all know who that auntie or cousin is, like I found it so much easier to manage my feelings. I wasn't frustrated by those conversations that you always get into with family. I didn't realize at the time that my intention was helping me, my legacy for the weekend was helping me sorry, regulate my emotions for the weekend. But now, and based on what you said, I realized what I was doing.
There you go. I love that. And so that sits in the power of choice, of in our own choices. Another component is the curiosity. Again, the curiosity of self. How do I want this conversation to end? How do I want this relationship to be? What is it that I can do in this moment to really show up the way I want to show up? That's really the curiosity self. But the curiosity of others is where you get an opportunity to be really curious. What is it about them that they're experiencing or going through that may be causing them to behave the way that they're behaving that is triggering me? Because sometimes it's not even about me, what they're doing, and that's okay. And so sometimes that curiosity of the other person allows us to self-regulate as well. And the last one that is the most important for me is assume positive intention.
Okay.
This is one that, if anybody who knows me knows that this is where I really hang my hat, is on assuming positive intention, because it's a game changer. And oftentimes we look at assuming positive intention as for the other person, like a gift to the other person. Like, I'm going to assume positive intention for you. That's not the case at all. When we talk about assuming positive intention, what that means is we look at another person, like regardless of what they've done or what they said, and we look at him when we say, you know what if in this moment this person is not at their best? What if in this moment this person is saying what they were taught to say? What if in this moment this person is saying what they believe to be true? Or what if in this moment this person is doing what they think is the right thing to do? Or what if in this moment what they're doing has absolutely nothing to do with me? And so when we talk about your ability to assume positive intention, it's your ability to really be able to look at another person and assume that they are human and that they might just be having a human day.
Yeah.
And this was only really powerful for me when I needed that. Because I always say, how many of us have had a bad day? I've asked these in sessions. People always, 100% of the time, people raise their hand. How many of us has said something that we didn't need to say? How many of us have done some things we probably regretted and didn't need to do? And in that moment, wouldn't you like for somebody to look at you and say, you know what? Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they didn't necessarily say what they wanted to say or should have said. And is that okay? And how can we regulate ourselves enough to be able to hear that? But you can't get to that place of assuming positive intent if you can't calm yourself down and move into that space of curiosity to just look at another person and say, are they just being human right now? And can we have even this conversation?
Yeah, again, this is curiosity is the defense against judgment thing coming
There
up
you go.
again.
There you go.
All right, Dr. Allen, we only have 10 minutes left. So here's what I'm going to do.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Do not, you don't, actually, in 2020, I promised I wouldn't tell any Black woman how to feel. So feel your feelings, and we're going to get this done in the next 9 minutes. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a fast, super fast R, and then I'm going to make a quick announcement, and then we're going to do a lightning round of some of these questions that we've been getting from the audience. Fair?
Yes. Our respectful listening, really easy. This is where we really dive into active listening, really defining what active listening is, how to activate it. Again, it has to be after emotional regulation. And then we go through the levels of listening. And we talk about what each one of those levels looks like, with the last one really being able to listen through the lens of empathy. So that's what R is, respectful listening.
Yeah, and that levels of listening was an eye opener for me. That there's active listening, which we all learned how to do.
Mhm.
Then there's curiosity, which is above that level 2, and then level 3 is empathy. So we think we're hitting out of the park with active listening, but that's just the start of the game.
Just the surface of it. Yes.
All right. So let me do this. I'm going to ask production if they can throw up our last slide. I want to make a quick announcement, and then we're going to pivot to some Q&A. And here's the announcement. If you like this conversation, if you like this this type of dialogue around what it takes as a Black corporate professional to accelerate your career or to do so with more ease, the ELC is here to help. We have a number of programs that are open for registration right now and that will soon be open for registration. Our next 2 virtual programs are The Power of Women at Work and Black Men in Leadership. You can get more information about those programs and sign up for them at elcinfo.com. Also, we have our C-Suite Academy, our Leadership Development Weeks, which take place in person in New Orleans, as well as virtually. And we have our Mid-Level Manager Symposium, which is part of the ELC Gala Week activities happening in Washington, D.C. All right. Again, more information on all of those at elcinfo.com. All right, enough of the commercial. Dr. Allen, I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to do these fast. There was a question about code switching. And the question essentially boils down to, if I'm a Black corporate professional and I code switch a lot at work, do you think that's going to reduce my level of emotional intelligence?
Actually, no. What I tell people is, when you have the capability to code switch, that is actually a sense of high emotional intelligence, because that sits in that space of social awareness. I always tell people, we have a tendency to look at code switching as a negative thing sometimes, but I always say code switching is actually you being bilingual, you being able to go into different spaces and understand, how do I acclimate into this space to be the most effective that I can be in order for the other person to really be able to understand me and to connect with me. And so your capacity and capabilities to be able to code switch shows how flexible you are in your communication, and being able to connect socially with others.
Awesome. All right. This next one is about mentoring young Black professionals. Do you have any advice about how more experienced Black professionals might mentor interns, entry-level Black professionals, around emotional intelligence?
One of the things I always say is, for anyone, emotional intelligence should be a part of your mentoring and a part of your coaching. But specifically, when it comes to Black male professionals, it's that ability to almost set the stage for safety around vulnerability.
Mhm.
And also to model that vulnerability, to share your vulnerable moments, to be able to be comfortable sharing your moments where you didn't have as much emotional intelligence and what that looked like. But we as people, sometimes emotions aren't always things that come naturally to us, because historically we've had to live in survival mode, and a lot of emotions can't survive in survival mode. And so when you're in that space, as you know, as our parents may have taught us or not shown us a lot of emotions, sometimes that's uncomfortable. And so our goal can be to really change the narrative in terms of how we accept emotions and how we talk about them, and just acknowledge that they exist. And sometimes we struggle and we get frustrated, and there are real emotions that exist in these spaces, and to model those. model that vulnerability.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a question about your book and how to get it. If other folks want to get their copy, what's the best way for them to do that?
It's on Amazon. It is on Amazon, and you can type it into the search "Lose the Debate" on Amazon, and you can purchase soft copy or a hard copy, paperback or hard copy.
All right. There's a question about faces and controlling your face as you're doing this internal work to regulate your emotions. Do you have any advice about how a Black corporate professional might maintain a professional face even as they're wrestling with some perhaps unprofessional thoughts?
There you go. It is. So this used to be me. I used to have RBF, like nobody's business. And so the emotional regulation exercises really do help support you through managing your emotions, even as they show up on your face. But one of the things I recommend when I do coaching for others is almost having an accountability partner, like having an account, like somebody that's on your team. And you say, when you see my face, go left, kick me under the table, or just get my attention.
Or
And
teams meeting.
yeah, yes. And I tell people to do that because what is going to be most important and helpful for you is to identify when your face is doing that and what your face is doing. You need to know, when is that happening? Why is that happening? And what is your face doing in that moment? It's the self-awareness that's going to help you change that behavior in those moments. And so having somebody to bring that awareness to you, to kind of point that out to you, is really beneficial. And then you being very intentional about asking yourself those questions as well, even when you feel that. But if you don't feel it, because I was the one, I didn't even feel it. It would just happen. And I finally had a really good coworker that I trusted. And I was like, when this happens, I want you to hold me accountable to it.
Love it. There's a question about when folks are in that pause, when they're taking a pause and seeking to manage their emotions, regulate their emotions. In addition to breathing, is there any self-talk that you've seen help people move from triggered to, okay, I can activate my frontal cortex again?
Yes. So we talked about the assuming positive intent, making sure we go ahead and use that as key in that moment when someone does something to us and someone says something to us. Assume positive intention and be curious. The other one is asking yourself, what is the story that I'm telling myself? Like, what story am I telling? What am I saying is happening here? What am I saying that they're doing and why they're doing it? And really be clear about what is the narrative that is creating this high emotion for me. And do I even have enough information to have a full story? Is a really important one to consider as well. Because oftentimes, again, the emotion is blocking out the logic. And so what the pause gives you is an opportunity to reinsert your logical components, the logical aspect of your thought process. And so keep that in mind as you pause. What is the goal of the pause? The goal is the pause is to re-engage with the logical component of your brain. And then from there, that is where you have more insight, more curiosity, more perspective. And so the pause is giving you time for your brain to catch up with itself.
Oh, this is good. All right. In a second, I'm going to ask you to share. I have one more question, but I'm going to ask you to share how people can get a hold of you if they have more questions, just want to have you speak or consult. But this last question is, do you have any suggestions of professional responses appropriate for the workplace when you're triggered? So I'm triggered, and instead of pulling out, where am I? Instead of pulling out West Baltimoreanian, how might I respond in a more professional and appropriate way?
Oh, okay. So it's very situational. But when you
Fair.
think about triggers and you're in a professional situation, let me think about some of the phrases that we thought about in the book. I'm really quick at using my phrases. So if I'm triggered, again, I always go to curiosity, and I go with a phrase. Can you tell me more? Again, can you tell me what you meant by when you said that? Um, if you're in a space where you're comfortable sharing with someone that you are triggered, one of the things that you can utilize is the aspect of, can you give me a few moments to pause right quick? Because there's something happening right here and I just need to figure it out. Like, I will use even that exact phrase. And so it depends on the person, it depends on the context, and it depends on the relationship where if there's vulnerability that sits there in terms of how you can respond in terms of you being triggered. Because you can say to people that you're really in close proximity to, what you just said really triggered me and I don't know why.
Yeah.
But
All right.
you got to be able to be vulnerable enough to do that.
Yeah, you gotta say it out loud.
Yeah, to say that out loud.
All right. First, I want to thank Dr. Summer Allen for joining us for this conversation today. Last question. Dr. Allen, how can people get a hold of you?
Oh, they can go to my website, eqstrategist.com. They can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me at drsummer@eqstrategist.com. Any of those ways you can connect with me. I would love to hear from you.
Excellent. Summer, Dr. Allen, soon to be double Dr. Allen.
Yeah.
I want to thank you again for the conversation today. I want to thank the production team that made all this possible. And I want to thank all of you who are listening, watching this live or in the recording, for taking the time to invest in yourself. We don't believe in Vegas rules, what happens here stays here. We believe in Reno rules. What happens here stays here, but what is learned here must leave here. So hopefully you will share some insight or some takeaway that you learned today with someone who you think might need it. For more information about the ELC, the Executive Leadership Council, and our leadership development programs, you can go to www.elcinfo.com. Perhaps you'll join us for one of our upcoming events like Power of Women at Work, Black Men in Leadership, C-Suite Academy, or Leadership Development Weeks. You might see Dr. Allen at one of those. But regardless, we hope that we have earned the privilege of your time and your attention. So take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too. Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.